today we're going to be talking about one of our essentials, living generously. And at Fairhaven, we define this as giving of our resources joyfully and sacrificially. So today I'm here with Justin Highland and Paul Clark. So Justin, do you want to kick us off and explain what this essential means?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first question is really why is this so important to live generously? And I don't want to brag on my important friends that I know, but I have a friend named Jesus who taught us that this is super important, that he demonstrated for us what a generous life looks like. So we come to understand that financial generosity matters a lot. There are scriptures like 2 Corinthians 9, 6 through 8, and Proverbs 11, 24 and 25 that teach us clearly about the importance of financial generosity, but it's also a way of life. It's a way that we can choose to live and choose to posture our hearts to the world and the people around us that mirrors the image of God, that says to the people around us, and it says, you are important. You have value. You are worthy of sacrifice and attention, just like how God, when he sees us, he sees that value and he lives generously towards us. He pours out his grace. James tells us he's the father of gifts that come down from heaven to us. So I think that this is more than money. It's more than just one angle, but all about how is our heart postured towards the world.
That's good. I think just, the heart posture is key, right? We want to be generous as God has been so generous with us, right?
Absolutely.
Obviously providing the ultimate sacrifice in Jesus.
Yeah. Imagine the opposite.
Yeah.
Imagine saying I follow Jesus and then living a life that says everything I have is mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't work.
Right. So how do you bring generosity in your day-to-day life? Is it, about money and giving away compliments? What does that look like?
Well, for me, for Kay and I, generosity does start financially. We do believe that God calls us to tithe and to give a tenth of the things that he gives to us. So we do that for the church. We give a tithe. And then, as we've been married for a long, long time, we've known missionaries and become friends with different people who are in ministry. And so we support a number of people like that. And one fun thing that we do is each month we set aside some money. We call it generosity money. Mm-hmm. And so as we go through the month, we try to just be sensitive to somebody that we might meet or someone we might hear about who is in need. And so for us, then that money allows us to be generous almost spontaneously, rather than saying, that's not going to work for us this month or whatever. So we really do enjoy giving in that way. But beyond finances, as Justin explained, it's live generously. It's not just give generously. Mm-hmm. And so as I go through the office or the church on a Sunday or one of the weekdays, I want to be aware of people that are discouraged who just need a word of encouragement, mm-hmm. or just a compliment or some gesture of kindness, because those are all gestures of generosity. And so they're all really important for us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For me, God has had to instruct my heart about finances a lot over time, and coming to understand that my role is actually to give. So for me, it's a kind of a cold calculation that my wife and I have to do. We look at our money, we calculate a tenth, and we give that to the church. And as God has enabled us to do that over a period of years, mm-hmm. over the last decade of our life, that's been amazing. It's been amazing to see what God does with that. And on top of that, as you mentioned, having the joy of being able to support a friend of mine who's a missionary to the Muslim diaspora that's been affected over wars over the last decade that are in countries in Europe. It's amazing to get to support that, mm-hmm. and to hear that somebody's decided to follow Jesus, mm-hmm. and to know that through generosity I got to have some small part in that. Mm-hmm. In this place in the world I will never go to. Mm-hmm. It increases joy in our lives in a huge way. Mm-hmm. And I think that the posture of generosity, it really does apply to how we live a day-to-day life. When I'm getting ready for my small group to come to my house, my heart's posture can either say oh man, people are coming to my house today. I have got to figure this out. I got to do the dishes. How are we going to be ready in time? Mm-hmm. Or my heart's posture can say, I'm privileged that people are going to get to come to my house and hear. So I want to give this time away freely, mm-hmm. and as an act of worship to God, and set aside, sacrifice the time that it takes to do that, to say no to the activities that I might prefer to do on this particular day for this particular season, and to set that aside and give it as an act of generosity to my small group and to my friends so that we can encounter God together. That's generous.
Yeah, and displays God's love, right? When I'm prepared for you, I value you, and I'm ready to do this for you.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Yeah. So Justin, I know also, when you're talking about the heart posture and generosity, I think one thing that's just struck me in your life is how you've been willing to care for 2 kids through the foster care system. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
For sure. That started with my wife and I were on a mission trip, and we felt a nudge from God early in our relationship, actually, before we were married, that he would call us one day to care for children. And so we said, back before we knew what it meant, we said, yes, God, when you ask us, we'll say yes. And so that came about in 2 different ways. Actually, one through the foster care system. We decided to become foster parents and care for a little girl over a year, and once caring for a family member for a long period of time. And that was an important decision to have made ahead of time, to say, God, I'm going to live generously, even if you ask me to care for a child that's not my child. That you care for me, God, when I was far from you. And so I can choose to live with that same generosity and care for a child. And it's heart-wrenching, because usually, even in a family relationship, there's give and there's take and there's receiving. But God has had to be close to my wife and I's heart in these situations, because in choosing to live generously, you give and you don't get that reward back all the time. You don't always get the expectation that you would have. So that's been really formative for Esther and I to give, and then to let go and trust that God is going to do what he wants to do in those children's lives as they've gone back to be with their families.
So what if someone is listening and their finances are really tight and they don't feel like they have anything to give away? What advice would you give them?
Well, in life, there are seasons of abundance and there are seasons of scarcity, but the challenge is that we should never live with a sense of scarcity. God has been good and generous to us, and even if we can't give what we'd like to give financially, we can give to everyone around us in our time and our attention, our compassion, our understanding. We can make life good for some people, just by giving those kinds of things away. But then as God does supply the means for you to give financially, just begin with one amount and grow that amount over time. Nobody has to jump right in at 10% or 20% or whatever it might be. Just give gradually in increasing amounts over time, and that honors God.
That was my wife and I's experience when we experienced God's conviction that early in our marriage it's time to start tithing. It felt overwhelming to look at how we were spending when we were being thoughtless, and what we felt we needed to do from this conviction from God. And we started with an amount, and as time went on and small cost of living raises happened, or a job changed, or as we just felt more ready to sacrifice at a deeper level, bumping that up over time is exactly how we got to being able to have the joy of tithing.
Right.
So in living generously, I think one of the risks, right, is it could be just a check the box. You guys talked about 10%, but we want to always be challenging ourselves. What's next, right? How do we display God's love? It's that heart posture.
Yeah, I think that the call of Scripture and the call of Jesus is to understand that I'm a follower of Christ. I'm a servant of him. Everything that I have belongs to him. So when he challenges me, when I'm listening to him and I sense him calling, I don't really have a right to say, whoa, God, I've given 10%, I'm good. God has so much more for us than that. God has so much more he could do in the kingdom through our generosity when we respond to him. So this isn't about checking a box. It's about opening our heart posture for the rest of our lives to understand what Jesus teaches us, that what we have is not our own. I'm bought with a price, and all my stuff goes with me. All of my stuff goes in with that price, and it belongs to his kingdom now.
Paul, Justin, thank you so much for your honesty and sharing your wisdom today. There's just so much to think about and consider as we're looking at how do we live generously.